This is why these summer showcases matter. Multiple Penn State commitments proved why they are 5-star caliber at these recent summer camps.
You are Locked On College Crossover, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
That is right. It is a Locked On crossover to talk some Penn State football recruiting. And thank you so much for making this episode your first listen and watch of the day. My name is Zach Sako, and I'm your host of Locked On Nittany Lions. He is Brian Smith, recruiting expert here for Locked On. He also hosts the Portal podcast, which talks about all things high school recruiting and the transfer portal. Today's show is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, use code Locked On College for $20 off your first purchase. Thank you to the everydayers out there for supporting both of our shows and being subscribed to the YouTube channel and wherever you get your podcasts. Well, Brian, we're going to talk about some of the upcoming commitments for Penn State. There are two that are set to commit in a matter of hours, depending on when you watch this show. We will discuss their commitments and where 2026 stands for Penn State. Also NIL concerns, but it's not about what Penn State is doing. It's about what other schools are doing that Penn State's going up against and why it is concerning. We're going to begin with some of the recent summer showcases that you were at, Brian, and got to witness the likes of Kevin Brown, who I went on the record and said, this guy's going to be a guaranteed 5-star when the rankings adjust, but also some other prospects. Keemon Spell was there, Khalil Taylor, and another target that seems like it's a Penn State slam dunk commitment. He's currently uncommitted, but don't rule out Clemson in this recruitment. We'll explain why. Brian, I want to start with those prospects, the ones that stood out to you that are currently committed to Penn State. Which one caught your eye the most?
Probably Brown. At the Rivals 5-star camp, those are elite players, man. A lot of those kids will play in the NFL. And whether he lined up right or left, it didn't really matter. He's just very good at countering whatever the guys come at him with in these one-on-ones. D linemen have a big advantage because there's no pads. It's harder to get hands-on. Kevin won the event last year as well at Rivals 5-stars and underclassmen, but he was really good. I think he'll like his mentality tells me right tackle, but he's athletic enough probably to play left tackle. Like he wants to like overpower guys. And he's a super strong kid, but his footwork was good. He adjusted. Even when he got beat initially, he used his strength and his length to get more depth, push guys away. Like he's got a chance to play early. And I'm sure not many guys start at Penn State as a freshman. I get that. But if he started as a sophomore, was a 2-3 year starter, it would not be surprising.
And like I said, it's great to follow up on this because I just did an episode about Brown's outlook. Is he a tackle? He's listed at on 3 as an interior offensive lineman. So maybe he moves to guard. I'm not entirely sure. But what it does show about Brown is that he's so versatile that he could line up as a guard, play either side, left tackle, right tackle. What impresses me is the athleticism, his ability to move, that he is quicker, more agile than some of these defensive ends that are much lighter than him. And Brian, you and I actually discussed this beforehand. He's listed at 260, but he's actually 290. So he's bulked up a little bit here. So it looks like the 24/7 on 3, the rest of them got to catch up and get their measurements correct here. But somebody that weighs 290 and moves the way that he does, that's insane.
Yeah, that's part of it. Like sometimes you just got to see it with your own eyes. Because like when I first saw him walk out there, I knew who he was. I'm like, man, he's got some really big legs. That kid spent some time in the weight room. He's naturally gifted. I want to see how he does against some really good pass rushers. And he was just as good laterally as he was just taking a basic set and trying to power guys. He's just as good moving laterally. So that when I saw that with his strength, I'm like, okay, this guy can play tackle. Now, I don't have a problem if Penn State played him at guard. Mentality-wise, Brown wants to overpower guys. That's not any secret. But he's got the athleticism to play tackle. So I expect him to play both spots at Penn State. And it just depends on where you get into the lineup quicker. And, like Saban did this too. Like, guys, it's really highly recruited. There's no tackle spot open. You put him at guard, and when somebody graduates, you move him out. I can see Brown doing something like that too.
Brown, I think if Penn State wasn't so loaded at offensive line, would play right away. And he very well might contribute his freshman year, but to be a starter or heavily in the rotation, probably his second year, but he will play sooner rather than later. There's definitely, if there's an opening, he will play. He will not sit and wait his turn. Let's talk about 2027, because I think, now, do you think Kevin Brown's, just quickly, is he a 5-star when the rankings are finalized?
I don't know if the rankings will detail that, because that was just for like the rivals and on 3 people were there. 247's not there, so they won't have any impact with that. It's possible. I didn't ask anybody how that's going to go. And the rivals rankings are going away. It's all going to be the on 3 guys doing it. Mm-hmm. It's convoluted. I'll explain it another day, but I don't know, because there's only 2 guys doing the on 3 rankings. Okay. Charles Power and one other guy. So I'm not sure. But like, he was the best offensive tackle at Rivals, 5-star. You would think so. He won the award for the second year in a row.
So you think he would become a 5-star at the end of the day, but things are changing here. Another player that shows that they are 5-star caliber. And if you're doing the rankings right now, On3 has him as a top 20 player nationally, which means that he is a 5-star player. This is for the class of 2027. Khalil Taylor is someone that you brought up immediately. Taylor, I mean, this is someone that Penn State needs because of everything that's gone on at wide receiver. And for him to shut down his recruitment as well, he's locked in to Penn State, and he's still another cycle out.
Yeah, he's a nice kid. Real quiet, just basic guy. Just likes Penn State. He's in Pittsburgh, plays at Seton LaSalle. I watched him on the field for 2 days. Like, that kid can really run. He gets by DBs that are national recruits. The DB group at Future 50 down in Bradenton was absolutely off the charts. And he still got behind some of them. Some of these guys are NFL players. He's got speed to burn. Like this, it's what Penn State needs, because when you have the ability to take the ball up over the top, it just changes everything what the defense can do, or they're taking a major risk. He's a home run hitter. So, and again, nice kid. He's the kind of guy you root for. He's coming off some kind of injury. I forget what it was he told me, but he looked injured to me. So he looks pretty darn good.
I don't know that he redshirts, honestly, just with what I've seen with his high school film. Yeah, there's no way he redshirts.
No chance. Zero chance.
No chance. So no speculation there. Something we can speculate about, because Keemon Spell was there, and there you really don't need to. Yes, we can talk about and analyze what Keemon Spell brings, but he's a top 10 player in the nation according to On3. So we know what Penn State is getting with Keemon Spell. But a player that was there that piqued your interest, Brian, was Maxwell Hiller. And why I link Keemon Spell and Hiller here, for those who don't know, impressive offensive tackle. He's a 4-star. Hey, maybe he ends up as a 5-star at the end of the day. The important part of this conversation is that he is uncommitted to Penn State. But Penn State fans and some people that are close to recruiting would tell you, oh, Maxwell Hiller, since he's from the state of Pennsylvania, should end up with the Nittany Lions, right? You say don't count your eggs before they hatch here. Is that and Keemon Spell actually alluded to the fact that Hiller would be committed to Penn State sooner rather than later. Brian, what do you like about Hiller as a prospect, and why aren't you so sure that he ends up being a Penn State Nittany Lion guaranteed?
We had same kind of deal as 5-star at Rivals when we went to Future 50. It's one-on-one. There's no hiding. And it's ridiculous amount of talented defensive ends. A bunch of kids Penn State's offered, Texas, Notre Dame, Florida State, you name it. They've all offered. And he won the event. And he was just dominant. And I remember walking into the night, there was a big 7-on-7. At halftime, we had the all-star, like the top guys got to go from the earlier in the day. And I walked in with Andrew Ivins at 24/7. I said, who'd you like the most today? And he goes, Maxwell Hiller really impressed me. I said, yeah, he was good. Then he went out and won the event. Like, I even put a post out. I thought nobody helped their stock. Not that his stock wasn't really high anyway, more than Maxwell Hiller. And he can play guard. He can play tackle. I wasn't sure what spot was better for him. It doesn't matter. He's a lot like Kevin Brown. He's just a good football player. He could kind of play wherever you need him. And you can tell he's got some pretty advanced technique. I don't know who's coached him. I don't know what his background is. I don't know if he's a kid that's played soccer or basketball, but like he moves his feet better for a big kid than just about anybody I've seen in a while. And he likes it. He enjoys the competition. Big guy, twitchy kid, inside against a massive guy. He adjusted as well as any guy I've seen in a camp setting. He was really impressive. That's an NFL player. And great kid, mentality, straightforward. He's not a jerk about anything. He's not arrogant. He just goes out and performs and lets his play do the talking. So I love that. As for his recruitment, he grew up a Clemson fan, and they are recruiting him. He's a diehard Clemson guy. So, I mean, he could go to Penn State, but, I mean, to my face, he said Clemson was the school he rooted for. So we'll see where that goes. And Penn State, Ohio State, it's the normal schools after him. South Carolina, Tennessee, it's all, it's the normal names that you would expect.
Penn State should try to get him committed sooner rather than later because, like you said, his recruitment is going to blow up sooner rather than later here. Oh, yeah. So you got to get him into the fold because then Ohio State and then Texas will start to make a push, and then it just doesn't get as easy. So we'll see how that's again for 2027. But Penn State has already shown the initiative there to get the number 1 running back, a top 3 wide receiver, and a top 50 player, one of the top 5 offensive linemen in the country in Leighton Von Brandt. They would love to add Maxwell Hiller, but just be aware that it's not as easy of a slam dunk as you might think it is just because he's an in-state Pennsylvania prospect. Brian, let's pivot. NIL is going to be a huge factor for any recruitment from here on out, as it always has been since 2021. But it's not so much about what Penn State is or isn't doing. It's what the other schools are doing. We're going to get that perspective of what Penn State is truly up against in this NIL era. And that is coming up next year on this Locked On Crossover. And this episode is brought to you by Game Time. You're going to download the Game Time app because buying tickets to your favorite events should not be stressful, whether it's concerts, comedy, theater, more than just sporting events. All of that is available on Game Time. Game Time makes it easy getting concert tickets. That makes it easier than ever before. And get this, prices on the app will actually drop as it gets closer to showtime. So you can save up to 60% off with killer last minute deals. And that's not the only great feature about Game Time. Right now, you can buy Penn State football tickets over at Game Time. Just go into the app or you can go into the website and you will see all of their best deals for games at Beaver Stadium. If you've never been to the venue before, if you've never been to Beaver Stadium, you've never been to a ballpark or a concert venue before, Game Time actually gives you a view in advance so you're not second guessing where you're going to be sitting before that event. Take the guesswork out of buying concert tickets, game tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create that account, redeem code LOCKEDCOLLEGE, LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off. Download the Game Time app today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. Brian, I'm sure that you have some horror stories with NIL or just the way this goes. It kind of branches in and out of some other conversations that Penn State isn't where they need to be if they're going to compete in NIL. I'm not saying they're far behind, but they're certainly not being as competitive as fans or as the program would like to be the case. So with what you know from across the country, this isn't really about what Penn State is or is not doing. It's about what they're up against. So, Brian, what are they up against? What are they competing against? How bad is it? And what should Penn State be aware of?
Let's do this by layers. Positions matter. Like quarterback recruiting, it can be different. Let me give you an example. The greatest booster of all time is Phil Knight, the creator of Nike, and he's Oregon. If they really want a kid, you're pretty much not going to get him.
Oh,
that's kind of how I look at it. He's worth like $4 or $5 billion, literally. So good luck. But it depends on the player if he wants to be involved. He's still a businessman. I don't know if you're going to win some of those kinds of battles, especially like Miami for a local kid. They've got the guy that's their booster is the guy that runs, what is it called? Inter Miami, like the soccer team. He's a Miami booster.
Okay.
I mean, like for the love of mankind, like that's insane. So it just depends on circumstance. Yeah. But at the same time, the key is still building relationships to get into the point where then the final, maybe flip of the coin is NIL, and Penn State does that. But position-wise, like D tackle, it's the hardest spot. I even talked to a major college coach about a month ago. That's the one spot, like out of the high school ranks for the elite kids, you're paying over $1 million up front, like the first year. And most schools just really don't want to do that. Penn State's one of them. It really doesn't. And that's why they struggle with D-tackle recruiting. They're not getting the elite kids, and it's not because they don't do well. Those kids, they want to get paid. Like Texas, Georgia, some of those schools, they'll pay over $1 million just to get a kid. So there's that spot. And to some degree for certain schools, this hasn't been as much for Penn State. Offensive tackle could be that way in quarterback. The money at those spots is just different. You don't see good quarterbacks go in the portal. They get lured into it, and the money's insane. People don't want to pay that money. Same thing with D tackle and offensive tackle. But that's risen the price for the linemen all across. There's a lineman, like I won't mention his name, that got like $1.8 million to go to a school in the portal. And I'm like, that kid was a part-time starter. He's pretty good at times, but he's been banged up, et cetera. He's getting 1.8. That's insane. So that's why the high school ranks like Georgia, LSU, some of these schools, they throw out crazy money for an individual kid because they don't want to jack with the portal. So if you want to develop the kids and take your chances that way, that's fine. But if you're going to get elite kids in the trenches, especially, you're paying north of 7 figures for some of them. There's some exceptions, but like not a whole lot.
When I hear that, it's Penn State. The thing that cures everything is winning. For the most part, though, I don't think that every single recruiting battle is going to go in Penn State's way. If they were to happen to beat Oregon, Ohio State, or even win a national championship, that would help. But if you're offering a player $500,000 over 2 years versus some of the reported NIL deals that we saw for some of the mutual targets, Luke Wafel, for example, that seemed like, you want to talk about slam dunk. Older brothers at Penn State, long-standing relationship with the family, with how long that they've recruited Owen, even though he went to Michigan initially, then he transfers into Penn State. That doesn't always help you at the end of the day, as we've seen that USC was the most competitive. They got into a bidding war with Ohio State, and Penn State, they made a late push. Who knows what that means, right? Is that just kind of lip service? What does that mean at the end of the day? But that was north of $1 million per year. Same thing with Carter Meadows. It was reported by, I think it was Michigan's On3 or 24/7. And so, forgive me if I'm misquoting there, but some Michigan affiliated outlet said that Carter Meadows has an NIL deal that is worth over $1 million per year. Penn State, I don't know that they can, or they're choosing not to. How do you bridge that gap, Brian? If you're not able to do that, is there anything you can do?
Not really. If you look at Michigan's D-line class, they got like 6 kids committed. They're all dudes. Coincidence? Probably not. It's not hard to sell Michigan anyway. Yeah. You throw out serious NIL money with it, they got arguably the best D-line class in the country. The question, and this is why some teams, Penn State, sometimes it's Ohio State or Notre Dame, Texas, depends on the kid. Some schools really don't want to do it. Georgia really doesn't like doing it, except for D-line, because, again, there's just not that many of them.
Yeah.
They don't want to do it because of the culture factor. They're afraid to tick off the kids that are already in the locker room. And I get it.
Yeah.
So my question is, like, USC in particular is buying a bunch of kids this year. There's not any. Is
that so?
That's like, I know I don't really care who likes it or dislikes it. They're buying kids, and they recruit well anyway. It's USC. That's a low-hanging fruit. But at the same time, they're getting some kids they would not get unless it was NIL. I want to look at some classes from like 23 and 24. Okay. In 26, how many of the kids stuck around that weren't like the local kid that wasn't natural to go to a USC or Oklahoma, whatever school you want? The transfers are probably going to come from the kids that didn't hit immediately, but got big NIL deals. When they find out they're not getting the same deal, they leave. It's not everybody hits too, so it's a risk. And that money could have went to somebody on your roster that's already established. Like, no school has bombed into this more than Florida State last year. There were some rifts from what I heard. Obviously, 2-10 kind of proves that there were some problems, but too many guys kind of smelled themselves and they didn't put out the effort they needed, and you get just smacked around. That's why teams are, I think, more apt to lay away from it. But some of the schools doing it, Texas Tech in particular, they're not going to get the 5-star kids without just buying it. They're not. They have no chance. So if you're Texas Tech, I get it, because it's your only shot. They got a billionaire oil man literally funding their program. He's literally a billionaire.
Yep.
So that you're not going to win NIL deals with that. They just got a commitment today from a kid. I'm like, he's going to Texas Tech? He had offers from everybody.
Yeah.
That's oil money. So sometimes it's best just to cut bait You're going to get a few kids, and for every Carter Meadows you don't, I mean, it is what it is. You want him on your roster.
Yeah.
If you got to pay over $1 million for him, you got to ask yourself, is that a good idea for our program? It's debatable. I've said it for a while. Penn State, Clemson, Notre Dame, those would be the three in particular I think do the best job of managing their roster, not necessarily overspending. They'll use money to get players, but they have a high retention rate.
Mm-hmm.
Those programs are probably going to be in the playoffs 3 out of 4 years because of how they do that. So there's different ways to get there, but some schools like Michigan, especially with the D lineman this year, they decided to pay, and same thing with USC, et cetera. We'll see how well that bears out in a couple of years.
I was going to walk away from this segment saying that, well, there's nothing Penn State can do. They're doomed. And honestly, I'm a little more impressed given what you've said here that, hey, under these circumstances, Penn State is recruiting well, given the circumstances. So and go ahead.
Yeah. I just think that they're going to have such a high retention rate based on who they're bringing in. It's not who you sign, it's who you keep. That's one of the things I'm going to tick off a whole bunch of fans at the end of the year, because I'm going to put that into my projections. And like those three schools, Clemson, Penn State, Notre Dame, will be higher. And it's not because of who had the best class. It's who those three I know will retain. Clemson's probably the best at it. They're going to retain more kids because they're not there for the NIL. That matters. I don't care who you sign. I care who plays and contributes.
It's definitely the case for Penn State. So I'm glad they're in that top 3 of who's the best at managing their roster, especially when it's so easy to just go for the pay for play route. Well, speaking of good recruiting or better than the circumstances present, Penn State's set to land not 1, but 2 commitments in the next 24 hours, depending on when you're watching this, listening to this, and potentially a third. Well, we're going to give you the latest intel about these prospects and what to like about the ones that are destined to commit to Penn State. That's coming up next here on this Locked On Crossover. Brian, we'll wrap up the show talking about Tyson Harley, 4-star edge defender, Marlon Bright, consensus 3 stars, listed as a 4-star per on 3, but high upside offensive tackle. And then there's another defensive lineman that Penn State is trending for, but it's not a guarantee that they land his commitment. We'll talk about why. So Tyson Harley and Marlon Bright are going to commit on July 5th, at least. 24/7 has a strong prediction in for them. On 3, same thing. All the signs point to Penn State unless something absolutely crazy changes. I do expect Penn State to land both of them here. Tyson Harley, 4-star defensive end. He's a true defensive end. There's no, he's a stand-up linebacker. This no hand in the dirt, rushes after the quarterback. I like Harley in terms of his physicality, the way that he's just able to bull rush offensive tackles. And for somebody that's listed currently at 220 and the way that he's able to move offensive linemen backwards, I mean, that's just pure strength. He's not even relying on his frame. That is more about what kind of power he is able to generate with a straight up bull rush type of move.
Yeah. When you get kids on the edge that can do both, and Penn State's had their share in the last, say, decade or so, it really makes a difference. You're setting that edge. It sets up more long yardage situations. And then, of course, whoever's wearing number 11 for Penn State can get after the quarterback. Mm-hmm. So that's important. I don't really care what kids are ranked at D end. I look at the long term. How's the frame look? Are they able to use their length well? And do they change directions, kind of effort? If he's setting the edge and he's able to run through kids at 220, then I don't really care what his ranking is.
Marlon Bright is an offensive tackle prospect out of the state of New Jersey, and that's a place that Penn State just wants to continue to branch into. Bright isn't the best tackle prospect that was on Penn State's big board. Of course, Emmanuel Iheanacho, Grayson McHugh were the priorities. Kevin Brown, again, just if you're talking about offensive linemen in general, those were the big 3 for Penn State. They landed 1, they didn't land the other 2. But Marlon Bright isn't that, I don't want to describe it as a pivot, but he certainly wasn't their first option, but he's still high upside. When I watched his film, he moves very well for someone that's listed at 6'6" and 270 pounds. He's a true offensive tackle, not somebody that's debatable. Well, does he kick inside? I mean, this is a player that if he develops and if he stays and again, sticks with the process, I think in year 3, he can be a serious contributor.
Yeah, that's what you're looking for. Guys with the length, guys with the size,
can't
the
teach
power.
it.
That's what I mean. Offensive tackle in particular, that might be the position where coaches are the pickiest because you can't have your quarterback getting smacked. It's the easiest path is around the edge. So if he's 6'6", 280 and above, yeah, you're not going to really argue with that. And Penn State's always hit Jersey hard. So that's a natural fit. It wouldn't be surprising if he ended up at Penn State.
One particular prospect that isn't committed to Penn State, but at least trending in the right direction for the Nittany Lions. And Brian, we can go back and forth and debate here of what the best case scenario is. I mean, sure, Penn State wants to take his commitment. This is Carter Gooden. This is actually somebody we've talked about before, came in for an official visit. Top player in the state of Massachusetts. 24/7 gives him a lot of respect compared to some of the other outlets. Again, On3 and Rivals merged, so I guess it's just On3 at this point in time. But ESPN2 and 24/7 really likes Carter Gooden as a prospect, just overall. Now, he's not facing the best type of competition. Massachusetts isn't really known as a powerhouse state for high school football, but the potential is there. And I think that's what 24/7 is known for, is that they really go off of maximum ceiling potential as opposed to, hey, how good are they right now versus how good can they be at a later time. It's really just focused on how good can they be at a later time. So Gooden is just that. The discrepancy here is that he looks like he's a defensive tackle, but I have heard that he's interested in staying at defensive end, that he doesn't want to convert to defensive tackle. Maybe he's open to it at a later time, but Penn State is recruiting him as a defensive end because he wants to be a defensive end, even though you and I would probably say that he does project as a guy in the interior.
Let the kid have his shot. If he proves you wrong, great. If he doesn't, he moves inside. This is the old argument. Every kid that's a tackle in high school that's projected at guard doesn't want to move. Every kid that's a linebacker that's too big doesn't want to play D end, et cetera, et cetera. It never ends. If the kid doesn't get on the field at D end and you tell him he can play D tackle, if he doesn't want it, then he's probably going to transfer out. It's no big deal. It'll take care of itself. So let the kid try it. If it doesn't work out, he moves to D tackle or he moves on.
The other school is UCLA, so I feel like this should be kind of favorable for Penn State. I'm not discrediting UCLA, though. It seems like their NIL presence has gotten better. Coach Foster's really settling in at this point in time. At least there's some momentum for the Bruins, right? They landed Nico Iamaleava out of the portal. Who saw that coming at the end of the day, right? Of all the schools that could have landed him. But I'm saying that at least don't just overlook and say, well, it's UCLA. Penn State should win this one guaranteed. But I do got to imagine that if Penn State does lose this recruiting battle, then I don't know really where else they go. I do say take the commitment, try him at defensive end, because you can never, if you do move into D tackle and he's agreeable to it, you can never have too many D tackles, especially with what we've talked about here, given the fact that you just get a good football prospect. And if he finds his footing at defensive tackle, then you don't make this astronomical commitment in the scheme of NIL. Like, you have to think about the value that you're getting with a prospect.
Yeah, I would agree with that. Like, Penn State has done a great job with this staff, getting in on kids early, learning where they should play. They projected a lot of kids, 3-star guys to be good. I'm not going to make any concerns about who they're recruiting first off for all that. The NIL thing we already went over. They don't overspend. They'll make the right call with that stuff. I trust their staff very much, if anything, recruiting and evaluation to build a roster. So, yeah, they're good.
And that'll do it for this Locked On crossover, talking some Penn State football recruiting and where everything stands with prospects that are getting ready to get their due respect in a matter of time, where NIL stands, and then commitments that Penn State fans should expect here. He is Brian Smith, recruiting expert here on the Locked On Podcast Network, host of The Portal. My name is Zach Seiko, credentialed media member for both Penn State football and Penn State wrestling, and your host of Locked On Nittany Lions. As always, thank you to the everydayers for supporting both of our channels. If you're not an everydayer, become one. Subscribe to the YouTube channel and wherever you get your podcast. Brian, appreciate the time as always, and can't wait to catch up again about Penn State football recruiting in the not too distant future.
Thank you, sir. Appreciate it.